And we're going to tell the Romans and everybody else, get out of our way. We got some business to do. And we ride up through the eastern gate, according to Ezekiel 43. It will blow open, and we will go up on the Temple Mount, and we will crown him King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I don't know where we're going to park all those white horses, but we'll deal with that when we get there. This is a day that you know what Bible prophecy is about? It's about hope. You know what's important about studying Bible prophecy? It's the only tool that gives you hope. That's what it was designed to do. There is a better day coming. God's in control. It may not look good right now, but look down the road a little bit. A Messiah is on the way. He is going to cure the world of all of its ills. There's going to be peace, righteousness, and justice. There is hope on the way. Fix your gaze, fix your attention, fix your focus on that hope. Live for Him today while you have opportunity, because that's the only thing to hope in. I guess I could stop there, but I won't. Verse 17. I saw an angel standing in the sun. He cried out with a loud voice, saying to all the birds which fly in mid-heaven, come, assemble for the great supper of God. Just a sidebar. And I talk about this when I talk about Ezekiel 38 and the Gog and the evil army that comes against Israel. That army gets fed to the birds too. Let's flash to Mark Twain for a moment. 1967, Mark Twain went to Israel. He and a guide went from the Lake of Galilee all the way down the Jordan Valley and up to Jerusalem. Took them 4 days, according to his diary. Innocents Abroad is the name of the diary. You can go check it out in the bookstore today. Innocents Abroad, he wrote, it took them 4 days. They never saw another human being, saw very little vegetation, and he wrote, perhaps there are more rocks in the road on the approach to Jerusalem than there were in the surrounding countryside. No humans, no animals. The place is totally desolate. Flash forward to the 20th century. Israel has become a Garden of Eden. The animals are starting to be restored. They have a biblical zoo in Jerusalem today, recognizing all the animals that used to live there. Up on the Golan Heights, there's an interesting thing going on. There's a little character up there called the griffon vulture. And they started domesticating them up there, not domesticating, but keeping them in cages up there and raising their own version of the Israeli griffon vulture. Now this griffon vulture is an interesting thing, and he is among thousands of birds of prey that have started to show up in Israel. Thousands of them. And these birds, interesting, 4 feet long, 8-foot wingspans, can eat about 14 pounds of food every other day. Israel had about 200 of them in a place called Migdal, and they had a grass fire up there several months ago, and they left. Well, prophecy teachers were all disappointed. Oh gosh, the griffon vulture is no longer in Israel. Hello, wait a minute. There's about 40,000 of them that live in Spain, and they use Israel as a flyway every year going back and forth to Africa. About 40,000 of those birds. Now you add that 40,000 to all the eagles and the kites and the buzzards and that kind of stuff, and there is a lot of birds of prey going around Israel. And you know what? I'll bet they'll be right in Israel about the time that God needs them to eat up the flesh of these evil armies. Griffon vulture. You can look at that little guy on the internet, and they're starting to refurbish the population of them there in Israel. Now, chapter 20. Did I get that far yet? Chapter 20. I got a comment on chapter 20. I have lost track of time. How much time we have left? 5 minutes. In chapter 20, in the church of my raising, we were taught that there was never, ever going to be a time when Jesus was ever coming back to this earth. Some of you have heard that. And as a kid, I was raising up going, what about Zechariah 14:4? In that day his feet will touch the Mount of Olives. What about this same Jesus taken up from you will come back again? And here we are in chapter 20 of Revelation, and this preacher I talked about in the early part of this message said there is no 1,000-year reign of Jesus on the earth. Well, let's go to chapter 20 for a moment. I saw the angel coming down from heaven having the key to the abyss. Now this is at the return of Jesus event. Having the key to the abyss and a great chain in his hand, laid hold of the dragon and the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for how long? Wow. Look at verse 3. And threw him into the abyss, shut it and sealed it over, and he should not deceive the nations any longer until the 1,000 years were completed. Verse 4, I saw the thrones, they sat on them, judgment given to them, and they, the last part of the verse, came to life and reigned with Christ for how long? 1,000 years. The rest of the dead, verse 5, did not come to life until the 1,000 years were completed. Verse 6, blessed and holy is the one who has part in the first resurrection. Over these the second death has no power, but they will be priests of God and of Christ and will reign for him for... Verse 7, and when the... Wonder how long this reign of Jesus is going to last? I believe it might be 1,000 years. Just an educated guess. I want to flash backward for just a moment. And I only have, I think, 50 minutes left. Look at verse 6 for a minute. I used to listen in the early part of my Christian days to a guy named Bob Harrington. He was the chaplain of Bourbon Street. Some of you remember that. The ones of you young enough not to remember it, do a Google and you'll get it. When he first got saved, he was one of the most successful insurance men in the United States. And when he first got saved, his wife went home and got her mother to come home and talk to Bob. Talk some sense into him. Because he was talking about getting into the ministry. So they were going to straighten him out. So they took him to a psychiatrist in Mobile. He said, yeah, I'll go see the psychiatrist. So he got in there, and the psychiatrist says, he said, when were you born? He said, which time? He said, you've been born more than once? And he said, yeah. He said, I've been born twice. But he said, if you've been born twice, you won't die but once. But if you've been born once, you'll die twice. That's what this verse says. And this psychiatrist looked at him and said, fella, you do need help. After 45 minutes, by the way, of talking to that psychiatrist, the psychiatrist got down on the floor on his knees with Bob, and he led his psychiatrist to the Lord. Great story. Bob Harrington. How long do you think the millennium of Jesus is going to last? Now look, go back to verse 2 and let me tell you where we got the word millennium. These are Latin words. 1,000 years at the end of verse 3. Everywhere you see 1,000 years, you see two Latin words. Millennium. Millennium. That's how we got the word. 1,000 years. It means 1,000 years. I don't understand. Well, there's never going to be 1,000-year reign on Jesus. Get out of my face. Look at chapter 21. Verse 10. Verse 1 is introduced us to a new heaven and a new earth. A new heaven and a new earth. The present Jerusalem is going to be changed when Jesus comes, and then it is going to be moved out of the way, and a new heaven is going to come down from God. Verse 2, I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from heaven from God, made ready as a bride. Verse 10, he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven. And it goes on to describe these gates that are going to be so beautiful that surround this city. And verse 12, we're introduced back to the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel. They're going to be there. Folks, if you take Israel out of the book of Revelation, there's not much left. If you take Israel out of the Bible, there's not much left. And I want to extend the point. How much of Israel do you have in your heart? Because the Lion of the tribe of Judah is the king of Israel, and he will literally come and be the king of Israel. But to extend that point a little further, he wants to be king in your heart today. And if you haven't taken care of that, we can take care of that before we leave this building today. The Bible says in Romans 10:9, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. You need to make sure to take care of that today while you have opportunity.